I pulled up to the coastal villa just as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the sky in amber and gold. This place used to feel like a sanctuary, a symbol of warmth and love. My mother had adored it, her garden, the soft white shutters, the way the sea breeze carried into every room. I hadn't been back since her funeral nearly a year ago. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally feel close to her again. But I wasn't expecting a stranger standing on the porch with a key in hand and an expression that screamed entitlement. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping out of the car slowly, my heartbeat thumping louder than the waves. The man was tall, maybe mid-20s, casual in cargo shorts and a smug grin. "You must be Elena," he said. "I'm Logan. This house belongs to me now. Your dad gave it to me." I stared at him confused. "You're Patricia's son." He nodded, twirling the keys in his hand. "Yeah, we moved in last week. My mom said your dad wanted us to have it. I mean, you're not using it right." My mouth opened, but no words came out. He continued. "Your dad said you were difficult about family stuff and it'd be best if you stayed away. Sorry, but you're not really welcome here." My stomach twisted. This was my family's house, my mom's house, and now it was given away like a spare coat. I walked back to the car and called my father. He answered on the third ring. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "What's going on?" "Logan says you gave him the villa." There was silence. Then coldly, "Yes, I thought it was the right thing to do. Logan and Patricia need stability. You never liked them anyway." "Dad, this is Mom's house," I whispered. "It's the only place that still feels like her." "She's gone, Elena. We need to move forward." By erasing her. "Don't be dramatic," he said, and hung up. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the waves crashing against the rocks. All the birthdays, the summer nights, the books I read on the porch, all of it just handed over to a boy who knew nothing of it. I wanted to scream, cry, lash out, but instead I sat in silence. I realized something right there with the salt air filling my lungs and my knuckles clenched on the steering wheel. This wasn't about a house. This was about being erased, and for the first time in my life I wasn't going to accept that. I wasn't going to be the quiet, understanding daughter. Not anymore. If my father and his new family thought I would just disappear, they didn't know me at all. And if Logan wanted the house, he was about to learn that taking something built on someone else's memories comes with a cost. My name is Elena Wyatt. I'm 31 years old, an architect who works freelance mostly on coastal properties. I live in Santa Barbara now alone, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment above a bookstore. Nothing fancy, but everything in it is mine. I built it piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck, without any help. Not from my father, not from anyone. When people ask about my family, I give a polite smile and change the subject. What do I say? That my mother died of cancer and my father remarried. A woman who calls me sweetheart with the kind of tight-lipped smile people use when they don't really mean it. That I had a brother once, Nate, who was the golden child, the protector. And when he died in a car crash, something inside all of us broke for good. Growing up, our family looked perfect on paper. My father, Donald Wyatt, was a high-profile real estate executive, built half the business parks in San Diego. My mom, Teresa, was warm, funny, artsy. She used to paint in the sunroom of the villa by the sea. That villa wasn't just real estate, it was her dream. They bought it together when I was 7. I remember helping her choose tiles for the kitchen, laying out fabric samples for the couches, laughing. When the wind kept blowing the blueprints off the porch. My dad was always working, always busy, but my mom made sure the house felt like a home. Then cancer happened. 3 years of watching her fade in and out of hospitals, of seeing the light in her eyes dim slowly until it finally went out. After the funeral, I thought my father would crumble. But he didn't. He was efficient in his grief, sold her car within a week, gave away her clothes within a month, and by that Christmas, Patricia had moved in. Patricia was everything my mother wasn't. Polished, ambitious, loud with her compliments, but sharp in her judgments. She had a son, Logan, from her previous marriage. I met him twice before the villa incident. He was younger than me, smug, always, on his phone, always talking about branding opportunities. The second time we met, he asked if I ever considered doing influencer architecture, like designing homes that looked good on TikTok. I didn't answer. My relationship with my father had never been close, but after my mother passed, something turned cold. He became distant, transactional. Every conversation felt like a board meeting. He criticized my career, said I could have been more successful if I joined his company. I tried once when I was 25. He assigned me to a junior design assistant role under someone who clearly hated nepotism and made it their mission to crush me. I quit 6 months later and never looked back. Since then, my father never really respected what I did, called it small potatoes. Freelance is just a fancy word for unemployed, he once told me over Thanksgiving dinner. I learned to stop arguing, learned to stay quiet, nod, and keep my distance. After Nate died, everything got worse. My father buried himself in work. I stayed behind to help Mom. It was like Nate took all the connection with him when he left. I was just the leftover. After my mom passed, I hoped maybe foolishly that Dad and I would grow closer. That shared grief might create something new. But all it did was widen the distance. Then came Patricia. She moved in like a summer storm, rearranged the house, got rid of Mom's china, replaced the art on the walls. I came home once to find a modern metal sculpture where Mom's canvas used to hang. It's called reinvention, Patricia told me with a smirk. I didn't answer. I just drove back to Santa Barbara that night and cried in the parking lot of my apartment building. And Logan. He just appeared as if he'd always belonged. He called my father Don, not Dad, but the way my father treated him, taking him to events, introducing him to business partners, it was like he had a new son. I tried not to be bitter. I told myself I was too old to care about family politics. But when I found out about the villa, when I stood on that gravel driveway and watched someone else call my mother's house his own, the bitterness turned into something else. A resolve I hadn't felt before. All these years I'd been the silent one, the obedient one, the one who left quietly instead of fighting back. Not anymore. They could keep underestimating me if they wanted. That would be their first mistake. 2 days after Logan told me the villa was his, I received an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Property Transfer Confirmation, Coastal Villa." My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The message was brief, clinical, and infuriating. It confirmed that the property deed had been officially amended. The villa was now listed under Logan Hart's name as the sole owner. No explanation, no forewarning, just a digital notification that erased a lifetime of memories with a single PDF. I sat in my apartment staring at the screen for a long time. Then I called my father. He didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third try, he picked up. "Yes," he said, already annoyed. "Why didn't you tell me you transferred the villa to Logan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because it wasn't relevant to you," he replied flatly. "What are you talking about?" "It's not your concern anymore, Elena. That house was just sitting there. Logan and Patricia needed a place to settle, and you're always off doing your own thing." It made sense. That was Mom's house, I said. She loved that place. She left it for us, for our family. "For me." "No," he said firmly. "She left it to me, legally. Everything passed through me, and I made the decision I thought was best for this family." I almost laughed. "This family." "You mean your new family?" Silence. Then he said, "You're making this more emotional than it needs to be. It's just a house, just a house." That was when I realized there was no point trying to reach him through memories or sentiment. He didn't feel anything about that house anymore. Maybe he never really did. "You're wrong," I said. "It's not just a house. And this won't stand." He sighed. "Don't be foolish, Elena. You can't win this. The paperwork is done. Move on." I hung up. My hands were shaking. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. All the grief I had pushed down over the years about my mother, about Nate, about how I was treated like a shadow rose to the surface. They really thought they could push me aside like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. Like the villa and my mother's legacy belonged to someone else now, simply because they decided it did. I stared out the window of my apartment, watching the sun sink below the hills. A plan started to form in my mind, not out of revenge, not at first, just the need for truth. for justice, for something to finally go the way it was supposed to. I dug through my old files and found a contact card, Linda Rowe, my mother's former attorney. She had been a friend of Mom's for over a decade and handled all her private legal matters separate from my father's firm. I emailed her that night. Within 24 hours, she responded. We arranged a call. I was wondering when you'd reach out. Linda said, her voice warm but firm. Your mother always suspected something like this might happen. That sentence made my chest tighten. Linda confirmed that there had been a separate will, one that named me as the inheritor of the villa. But after Mom's death, that version never surfaced. The one processed through probate was a more recent one, giving full power to my father. Was that version signed, I asked. Yes. But she paused. Your mother had doubts about Patricia's influence. She told me so. She said she felt pressured to keep peace in the family. But she also told me to keep a backup copy on file with a timestamp. My breath caught. You still have it. I do. It's not notarized, but it's enough to raise serious questions if you want to pursue legal action. I do. I didn't even hesitate. That night I reviewed the copy she sent. The date was 5 months before my mother's final hospitalization. It clearly named me as the villa's future owner and executor. Not a word about my father, not a mention of Logan. I printed it out and held it in my hands like it was gold. That house was meant for me, not because I deserved it more, not because of entitlement, but because my mother trusted me to preserve it, to honor it. And they had tried to bury that trust. Patricia and Logan weren't just opportunists. They were manipulators. And my father, he was complicit. Either too blind or too willing to let it happen. But I wasn't going to play the silent daughter anymore. I reached for my phone and dialed Rachel, a legal consultant I'd worked with on a city zoning dispute the year before. She was smart sharp and had once said, "There's no law stronger than a woman scorned with documents." I told her everything. And then I asked, how do we fight this? She didn't hesitate. We build the case like we're constructing a building, brick by brick. Let's start with the foundation. Rachel was the kind of woman who didn't waste time. Within a week, she had reviewed both versions of the will, compared timestamps, analyzed inconsistencies, and sent out formal information requests to the county recorder's office. She flagged the timeline of the transfer from my father to Logan as suspicious, too fast, too clean, and lacking typical documentation that would accompany a high-value property reassignment. They're counting on intimidation, she told me during one of our late-night Zoom calls. They assume you'll feel too overwhelmed to fight. She wasn't wrong. There was a moment when I almost backed down, when the idea of dragging my family through a legal battle felt heavy and ugly. But then I would remember Logan's smirk on that porch. I would remember Patricia's comment over dinner once, "You architects are all dreamers." No wonder the men run the real estate business. And I would remember my mother, her voice, her smile, the way she held my hand the night before she passed and said, "Don't let them erase you." I wouldn't. I couldn't. While Rachel worked on the legal front, I started my own quiet operation. I visited the villa under the pretense of retrieving some personal belongings. Logan had agreed, probably out of arrogance. 1 hour tops, he said. I've got people coming to look at renovations. Renovations? He had already hired contractors. I walked through the villa with a blank expression, nodding, pretending to be compliant. Inside, I was calculating every corner, every room, every vulnerability. As an architect, I knew this house better than anyone. I had helped my mom redesign the kitchen when I was in college. I'd drawn the blueprints for the guest house myself. Every tile, every angle, every structural quirk, it was mine. And I was going to use that knowledge. I reached out to an old client and friend, Julian, who specialized in smart home systems. I need discrete security upgrades, I said. Full motion sensors, cameras, environmental triggers, everything controllable remotely. He raised an eyebrow. Renovation or surveillance? Both, I said. And legal. Julian didn't ask more questions. He owed me a favor. Within 3 days, we had a plan. I funded everything myself. Quietly, efficiently. No bank loans, no paper trails that linked it back to me directly. Julian installed micro cameras in the entryways, voice-triggered assistants in the hallways, and a custom lighting setup that could create ambiance or chaos depending on the configuration. I knew Logan was using the villa as an Airbnb-style rental for exclusive clients. He posted listings under a fake management company, but a quick domain lookup confirmed the connection. Logan was monetizing my mother's sanctuary. That broke something in me I didn't know was still fragile. I recorded everything, guests coming and going, Logan giving tours, him standing in the kitchen saying, "This is where I imagine our brand tasting room will be." Our brand. My blood boiled. One night as I reviewed the footage, I saw Logan walking through the living room showing a couple around. "Yeah, my dad gave me the place," he said with that same smug grin. "My stepsister used to come here, but she's not really in the picture anymore." Drama stuff. The woman laughed politely. "Family's complicated." "Not when you know how to play it," Logan replied. That was the moment I decided this wouldn't be a simple legal case. This needed to be a message. I wasn't just reclaiming a house, I was reclaiming my voice. I called Julian. "Can we go further?" "Define further," he said. "Can we make the house react? I want it to know when someone's there and respond." He smiled slowly. "We can do that. Motion triggers timed audio synchronized lighting." "Want it theatrical or psychological?" "Psychological," I said. "Subtle, creepy, unforgettable." Over the next 2 weeks, we designed what Julian called the perfect defense system. Motion sensors in the walls could detect even subtle movement. The voice assistant would issue warnings cryptic, at first escalating with presence. Lights would flicker in coordinated patterns, shadows would move, audio recordings of whispered voices would echo in the hallways. The goal wasn't to harm, it was to unsettle, to make the villa uninhabitable for those who tried to claim it through deception. Meanwhile, Rachel discovered that the deed transfer had skipped a notarization step. It was a loophole, but a powerful one. Combined with the backup will and footage of Logan using the property for commercial purposes, we now had a case strong enough to file a formal dispute. Rachel smiled during our meeting. "He's walking around like he owns the place. That's his biggest mistake. We're building a timeline of entitlement, and it's going to collapse right under him." I thought about telling my father, about giving him one last chance to make it right. But then I remembered his voice on the phone. Move on, he had already made his choice. So, I made mine. The last piece of the plan involved a friend of mine from grad school, Sophia, a documentary editor. She helped me cut together a discreet presentation footage of Logan's illegal rentals overlaid with excerpts from my mother's handwritten letters and architectural plans she drafted with me. It was haunting, poignant, proof of a legacy stolen. We didn't release it. Not yet. But it was there ready. I watched it alone one night, headphones in tears slipping down my cheeks as my mother's voice played from a video we'd recorded years ago. "This house is for you, Elena," she said, laughing as she painted the hallway. "I hope it always feels like home." The next morning, Julian installed the final element. A voice message triggered when someone entered through the main door after 10 p.m. It said in my mother's voice, edited from that old recording, "You don't belong here. Please leave." I tested it myself. It gave me chills. "What do you want to call the system?" Julian asked. I paused, then smiled. "Mom." Logan didn't suspect a thing. That was the key. He had grown too confident, too used to getting his way. Patricia encouraged it, always telling him he was meant for bigger things, and that people like me, the quiet ones, would never take real action. I let him believe that. I let them all believe I was still hurt, still stunned, still powerless. Meanwhile, the villa had become something entirely new, a fortress of hidden intelligence. Every room was rigged with motion detection, sound layering, lighting control. Julian had programmed the system with a cascading escalation model. The longer someone stayed, the more unsettling the environment became. It started subtly, a flicker in the kitchen lights, a soft voice whispering from behind a closed door, a hallway that felt a little colder than the rest. By hour 2, the whispers grew louder. Footsteps echoed where no one walked, and shadows moved just out of sight. It was not supernatural. It was science code sensors and brilliant psychological manipulation, all completely legal. I didn't tell Rachel every detail. She didn't ask. Her focus was the legal framework. She drafted a cease and desist order addressed to Logan, demanding he halt all business operations on the villa immediately. It was dated, but not delivered. We needed one final sequence of actions to complete the trap. I booked a fake client through Logan's listing, an account I set up with Sophia. The client was a wealthy couple from Chicago looking for a private creative retreat. Logan confirmed the stay, offered a bottle of wine on arrival, and sent an email with check-in instructions. He never asked questions. Why would he? Money talks louder than intuition when you're chasing status. On the scheduled night, Julian and I sat in my apartment watching the live feeds. The couple arrived right on time. Logan met them, did his usual smug walkthrough, offered vague stories about family inheritance, and left with a wave. 20 minutes after his departure, the house initiated Phase 1. The couple explored the living room when the overhead lights blinked once. Then the entryway lights dimmed and a soft whisper echoed from the stairwell. "You shouldn't be here." The wife turned to her husband, startled. "Did you hear that he asked?" She nodded. They laughed nervously. It was just the beginning. Cameras captured every reaction, every shiver, every whispered conversation as they tried to rationalize the sounds. Then Phase 2 triggered shadow projections moved across the walls. At first subtle, then more intense. Julian leaned in. "They'll leave in under an hour," he predicted. They lasted 43 minutes. They left their wine bottle half-finished, grabbed their bags, and bolted. We clipped the footage. A perfect sequence. Visual evidence of this illegal rental complete with terrified guests and obvious breaches of housing codes. The next morning, Rachel sent the cease and desist letter to Logan, this time CCing the county permit office and the Office of Property Ethics. She followed up with an anonymous tip about Logan's unauthorized property usage, along with guest footage and booking links. By noon, the listing was suspended pending investigation. Logan tried to play it cool when he called me later that day. "Did you send some kind of complaint to the county?" he asked, voice tight. "Because someone did. And it's a mess." I played dumb. "Complaint? About what, the villa?" "They're saying I'm operating an illegal rental business, which I'm not." "Oh," I said, "that sounds serious. You're not funny. I wasn't trying to be." There was silence on the line, then he growled, "You better not mess with this, Elena. You're already out. Stay that way." I hung up. No more explanations, no more arguments. Let him feel the silence. It would be louder than anything I could say. Meanwhile, Rachel filed an official petition for a property dispute citing undue influence, improper documentation, and intentional omission of relevant inheritance documents. She included the backup will, the video testimony from Linda, and the footage of Logan profiting from the disputed asset. It was airtight, but I wasn't done. I wanted them to feel it. Patricia and Logan. I wanted them to experience the same exclusion they forced on me, so I invited them. I called Patricia directly. "We should talk," I said. "I'm willing to be civil." She sounded surprised but intrigued. "Where the villa? One last walkthrough. Closure." They agreed, of course. People like Patricia always want to gloat when they think they've won. I waited until they arrived, until they stepped through the front door. Then I activated the system. It was daytime, so the lighting effects were less dramatic. But the sounds, the carefully modulated creaks, the whispers still worked. "Did you hear that?" Patricia asked. Frowning, Logan rolled his eyes. "Old houses make noise." Then the projector cast a moving shadow across the living room wall, a tall figure, silent and steady pacing. Patricia froze. Logan looked pale. "What is this?" she demanded. I stepped in from the hallway. "It's justice," I said. The system spoke next. My mother's voice, soft but unmistakable. "You don't belong here." Patricia's face went white. "This is sick," she snapped. "You're sick." "No," I replied. "I'm prepared. You tried to erase me. You tried to erase her. But she's still here. In every wall, in every brick, in every detail." Logan reached for the door. "We're done." But the door didn't open. Julian had programmed a 2-minute delay for dramatic effect, just long enough to feel trapped. "We're leaving," Patricia said. "You won't get away with this. You already did." I replied, "But not anymore." When the door unlocked, they fled. We didn't follow. The trap had closed. And now the real fight was about to begin. The day after Patricia and Logan fled the villa, Rachel filed the formal lawsuit. It was a calculated move timed perfectly, with the county's temporary suspension of Logan's property usage rights. The complaint included everything evidence of the forged timeline, the backup, the improperly filed transfer forms, and most damning of all, the video compilation of Logan monetizing the villa under false pretenses. We submitted testimony from Linda Rowe, my mother's attorney, verifying the original will's authenticity and her concerns about coercion in the final months. Rachel attached a personal statement from me as well, outlining the emotional damage, the betrayal, and the importance of preserving my mother's legacy. It was raw, honest, and painful to write, but necessary. I told the truth not just as a legal strategy, but as an act of reclamation. Meanwhile, Logan tried to do damage control. He posted online about being harassed by a bitter stepsister, claiming he had every right to the property, that legal paperwork speaks louder than childhood nostalgia. The post didn't gain much traction, and within days it was deleted, likely under legal advice. Patricia called me once, trying a softer tone. "Elena, sweetheart, we don't have to do this. Let's talk like family." I let her talk for 3 minutes straight about how hard Logan's life had been, how he finally had a chance to build something, how my father only wanted peace. And then I said one sentence: "You built your peace on top of someone else's grave." She hung up. That was the last time she called. My father stayed silent. Not a word, not a text, not an email. He didn't reach out when the court date was announced, didn't ask for a meeting, didn't show up when we served him papers at his office. Rachel said that was his strategy: stay out of it, claim ignorance, and try to ride the middle. But neutrality is a position, she said, and the court will see that. The first court appearance was brief, procedural, but the judge reviewed the documentation and deemed the case worthy of further litigation. That alone was a win. It meant everything was now under legal scrutiny. Property freezes were placed. Logan couldn't touch the villa, couldn't rent it, renovate it, or sell it. He was furious. I received an email from his lawyer threatening to sue me for technological harassment. Rachel responded within the hour with a 20-page rebuttal explaining that all smart home systems were legally installed by the rightful architect of the property, me, and that all recordings were taken from within a private residence without breach of state law. We heard nothing more. 1 week later, we filed for a temporary injunction to reclaim control of the villa during the investigation. The hearing was tense. Logan arrived with Patricia, both dressed in sharp suits, trying to look composed. I wore black, simple and quiet, and said nothing during the session. Rachel spoke for us, clear and direct. This case is not about property. It's about trust. It's about a daughter whose inheritance was taken through manipulation and legal shortcuts. And it's about restoring what was taken. Logan's lawyer stammered through counterpoints, citing amended documents and recent signatures. But the judge focused on one thing: the original will, the time-stamped backup, and the speed at which the property was transferred after my mother's death. "This raises serious concerns," he said, "and until those concerns are addressed, the current ownership status is suspended." The gavel fell. Just like that, the villa was mine again, at least for now. I drove there that evening, alone. No cameras, no system activations. I walked through every room, slowly running my fingers along the walls, touching the wood of the banister, the tiles we chose for the kitchen. It was quiet, peaceful, mine. But I knew it wasn't over. Patricia and Logan weren't the type to walk away. They would come back, maybe with more lawyers, maybe with threats. I had to do something permanent, something they couldn't undo. Rachel helped me draft the paperwork. On the following Monday, I signed over the villa, not to myself, not to my father's estate, but to a nonprofit foundation for coastal preservation and women's housing support. The clause stated that the property would be maintained as a retreat for women recovering from trauma or loss, offering shelter, therapy, and creative space. I retained architectural oversight free of charge. A lifetime clause allowed me full access as a founder, but no profit rights. It wasn't about money, it was about meaning. That house had already been taken from me once. I wouldn't risk it again. By removing it from the chessboard, I ended the game. The next day, we served the update to the court and to Patricia's attorney. Rachel's note was brief: "My client no longer seeks ownership, only peace." The response came quickly. Logan had a meltdown. He emailed, called, threatened lawsuits. "You're crazy," he screamed in a voicemail. "You gave away the whole thing just to spite me. That house was our future." I didn't reply. What was there to say? You don't steal someone's past and expect to inherit their future. That weekend, I held a small gathering at the villa, just a few women from the community, some artists, social workers, architects. We stood on the porch sipping tea, watching the ocean. One woman said, "This place feels like healing." I smiled. That's the point. As the sun set, I realized something had shifted in me. I no longer felt like I was carrying my mother's legacy. I felt like I was living it. 2 weeks after the villa was transferred to the foundation, I received a letter. Not an email, not a call, a formal printed letter with my father's company letterhead. The envelope was thin, impersonal. I opened it slowly, already suspecting what was inside. It was a notification of disinheritance. Effective immediately, I was removed from any remaining family trusts, wills, and financial arrangements. There was no personal message, no emotion, just a signature Donald Wyatt. I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it in a drawer and closed it. That same afternoon, Patricia and Logan filed an emergency motion to contest the villa's transfer to the foundation, citing malicious intent and emotional duress. They claimed I had manipulated the court, falsified emotional trauma, and installed a hostile and dangerous technological system inside the house. It was their last card, and they played it with desperation. But they made one mistake. They underestimated the law. Rachel had anticipated this move. She had filed every document with precision, recorded every interaction, saved every voicemail. The foundation had already accepted, the villa had already begun minor renovations under nonprofit jurisdiction, and had public support from several community leaders. The court hearing was scheduled quickly. It was short, efficient, brutal. Patricia took the stand, dramatically recounting how the house terrorized her and her son. Logan tried to frame himself as a young entrepreneur misled by family politics. Their lawyer claimed the technology violated privacy and created unlawful psychological warfare. But they had no proof of ownership, no legal claim to the property, no evidence that I had violated any laws. When my turn came, I didn't say much. Rachel handled most of it. But I did read one thing, an excerpt from my mother's letter to Linda, her attorney. "If anything happens to me, I want Elena to have the villa. She understands what it means." It was never about the structure. It was about love, history, peace. She will know how to protect it. The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded slowly, then dismissed the motion with finality. "This case is closed," he said. "And frankly, it should never have reached this level." Patricia's face was pale. Logan looked like he had aged 5 years. My father wasn't there. He never showed up. Not once. As we left the courtroom, Rachel turned to me and said, "That's it. They can't touch you now. The villa's future is safe." I nodded. I should have felt triumphant. But what I really felt was clean, like a wound had finally scabbed over. That evening, I returned to the villa alone. The renovations had already begun, new windows, repainted trim, a meditation garden in the back that the foundation director was designing in honor of my mother. I walked through each room quiet and slow, touching the walls, like reconnecting with an old friend. In the living room, I sat down on the floor and looked around. The shadows were gone. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like possibility. I reached for my phone and deleted all the old footage. Every clip of Logan's tours, every recording of whispered warnings, every piece of evidence we had used to win. It had served its purpose. Now it was time to let it go. The past didn't need to be erased, but it didn't need to live inside the house anymore either. The villa had been reclaimed not as a trophy, but as a sanctuary, a place where women could come and heal, where silence meant peace, not fear, where boundaries were honored and stories were respected. I stood on the porch as the sun set over the ocean, the wind gentle, the light golden. Somewhere deep inside, I knew my mother was proud, not because I had won, but because I had rebuilt, not destroyed. She used to say, "The strongest foundations are the ones we pour during storms." This house had survived one, and so had I. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room of the villa, sunlight pouring in through the pale curtains. It was the first time I had slept there in years, and it felt different now. Not like a return to childhood or a desperate search for what was lost. It felt like ownership, not just of a property, but of myself. I brewed coffee in the same kitchen where my mother used to hum while making breakfast, the same counter where I once did homework, where Nate carved his initials, where Patricia once laid down blueprints to redecorate without asking anyone. All of that was in the past now. It didn't have power anymore. Outside the foundations, volunteers had begun planting native wildflowers along the path to the garden. I watched them from the porch, sipping my coffee heart full in a quiet way. Not bursting, not soaring, just full. That was enough. I spent most of the day walking the perimeter of the property, checking on repairs, reviewing design plans for the wellness center, talking to women who would help run the programs. One of them, a therapist named June, told me, "We're going to help a lot of people here, Elena. You gave us something more than a building." I didn't respond right away. I just nodded, because I knew she was right. The villa had always been more than walls and windows. It had been a symbol of memory, of connection, of loss. But now it was something new, something living. That evening, I took a photo of the sunset from the terrace, the same angle my mother used to capture every summer. I posted it online with a simple caption: "Some homes protect us. Others teach us to protect ourselves." The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from women who had been cast out by their families, from daughters who had fought to be seen, from survivors of betrayal, who had rebuilt their lives brick by brick. One message stood out. It read, "Thank you for reminding me that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's sacred." That night, I lay in bed and thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the silence, the storm I had walked through alone, and I thought about my father. He hadn't called, hadn't written. I didn't know if he ever would. But I knew one thing with certainty: I was no longer waiting for an apology, for recognition, for love offered with conditions. I had stopped needing to be chosen by people who only valued obedience. My mother had chosen me. Her trust in me had been quiet, but unwavering. That was the kind of love that lasts. And in honoring her, I had finally learned to honor myself. Some people never get that chance. I almost didn't. If Logan hadn't stood on that porch with his keys and his smirk, maybe I would have stayed quiet. Maybe I would have kept swallowing disrespect in the name of peace. But he did. And because of that moment, everything changed. Not out of vengeance, but clarity. In the weeks that followed, the villa began to hum with new energy. Artists painted murals. Counselors held sessions under the pergola. Women laughed in the garden, planted herbs, cooked meals together. One morning, a young woman named Tara approached me with tears in her eyes. "I haven't felt safe in a house for years," she said. "Until now." I hugged her, not because I had words, but because I understood. The last piece of the house that needed attention was the old sunroom, my mother's favorite place. I had avoided it until the very end. But one morning, I opened the door and stepped inside. The light was still perfect, warm, golden, gentle. I walked to the corner where her easel once stood. The wall was bare now, but I could almost see the outlines of her last painting. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photo, a portrait of her smiling on the porch wind in her hair. I placed it on the windowsill and whispered, "It's done." There was no reply, no whisper in the breeze, but I felt her. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as something within me, something quiet and strong. For the first time, I didn't feel like a daughter trying to earn her place. I felt like a woman who had built her own, a life shaped by storms but not defined by them, a home not inherited but created. And that was enough. That was everything.